All right, so we are back at it, and today is our hip video. So the hip joint is of particular interest to me. It's also a really, really important joint. So the hip joint is a ball and socket joint, so you can think of it like your shoulder, how your shoulder can move in all different directions. The hip is the same way. Now it has a little bit of a deeper socket, which means the joint is restricted, right? So some people can move their hips like crazy. We can move them in all directions, not nearly as much as we can the shoulder. That means inherently there is a little bit more stability in the hip joint itself. But the hips take a huge brunt of the force from our lower body. They then transmit that force up the spine, through the pelvis area. So a lot of people that I see with lower back pain, lower back dysfunction, a lot of it stems from the hips. So for my low back pain people, hip pain people, this one's especially for you, I spend personally a ton of time mobilizing my hips in all different directions. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to do is open up our hip into abduction, or the motion of going outward. We're going to do that with something called the frog stretch, or the modified frog stretch. I'll get a diagonal, I'll get a few different angles for you so you can see this. The biggest thing, always to your tolerance. Some people are going to be able to start wider, some people need to start narrower, feel it out. So quadruped position, meaning hands and knees, 4 points of contact. What you're going to do is start decently wide. I don't want the feet necessarily so far outside of the knees because that's going to create a little bit of impingement there at the knee joint. So either equal or inside. For those of you that have a little bit of restriction or tightness through the hips, inside your hips it's going to be a little bit easier, and then you can start to move your feet outward as you go. Okay, so I'm going to start nice and wide, hands supporting my weight, and I'm just going to sit and rock back into this position. Just straight back and forth to start. Let's hit 10 of those. Halfway through, I am going to change direction so you can see what I am doing. Good, so I'll come this way, feet flat onto the ground here. Trying to keep my back relatively straight. You are going to probably get a little bit of rounding at the bottom, and that's okay because we're really going for hip range of motion right now. We're not loaded. We don't really care so much about what our spine is doing at the moment. Good, and keep rocking through that. So what you're working on here is this abducted position, flexing the hip, and then also a little bit of internal rotation, which a ton of people are lacking just because of the lives that we live. We don't often do that motion a ton, and that actually, a deficit in internal rotation has been linked to back pain. Okay, so here's a little bit of a tougher variation. What you're going to do, get super wide. You're going to sink back. When you get back, you're going to lift your left leg off the ground. Come back up, sink back down, lift your right leg off the ground. Good. Up, down, left leg, up, down, right leg. Now notice, I'm not really trying to hike my whole side here. I really want that motion occurring only from the hip. It's going to be very slight. You're probably going to feel it on the outside here. So let's go about 6 more total. Good. And if you start to loosen up along the way, feel free to go from here, for instance, all the way out to there, and you can get down on your forearms, increase the stretch that you might feel in your adductor muscle group, which is the inside of your leg, which is another muscle group that I love training that oftentimes is not really heavily trained. Good, and again, now you can start to sort of go down to the right, come back up, go down to the left, really explore different motions. Kind of come through in a circle if you want to. Again, mobility training is all about finding places that you need the most help, that you have the most stickiness, so to speak, and really trying to work those out. Cookie cutter programs can be super helpful to get you started, but once you start to learn your body's strengths, weaknesses, you can really sort of take it in any direction you want. Okay, moving on now, still in that quadruped position. By the way, if you have any sort of wrist problems and you don't like being in this position, you can either make fists, keep them neutral, press into the ground, or grab some light dumbbells, and that'll help you keep you neutral as well. Another trick too, if you roll up a towel, you can place it under your palm, so that takes away the angle a little bit and doesn't make it as harsh. Okay, so we are going to go hip circles. So what that means is tuck your knee in, out around, back, and come in. Ideally, you want to keep that hip flexed. As a matter of fact, if you want to grab a tennis ball to really make sure that you're having this motion at the hip, you're going to squeeze that tennis ball in between your calf and hamstring back here. That way you're really focusing on getting the hip going. So I'm going to go 10 one way. I got all kinds of clicks and pops going on right now. That's totally, totally normal. A lot of people ask me about this is clicking, this is popping. What I tell them is, if you saw the inside of a hip joint, you'd understand why it's clicking and popping. But as long as it's not associated with any really sharp pains, locking, meaning you can't move it once you feel a click, I tell people those are often very, very safe to just work around. Feel those clicks, pops, kind of almost, like I had said in the ankle foot video, if you feel a sticky, clicky area, spend some time there. Try and work that out. Get a little bit of range of motion going there. Good, so I'm going to reverse now. Go the opposite way. And again, I use a lot of these exercises as a warm-up. I know some of you like warm-up, my hips are kind of burning right now, and that's true. But you want to get muscles decently fired up before you exert a lot of force. Like if you're deadlifting, sprinting, whatnot. Even just doing this, I'm starting to work up a little bit of a sweat, which is really a good thing. Good, let's switch back over. And just rock through those again. I really do like this tennis ball cue, just because it prevents you from using, making you think you're doing a lot when you're really just kind of like donkey kicking, which is a good exercise in and of itself, don't get me wrong, but not what we're trying to do here. And again, you might see as I flex my hip, my back will round, extend, it arches a little, totally fine. Those areas are very connected, sort of interwoven into each other. Good, and switch over to the opposite side. For those of you who haven't tried exercising and talking at the same time, you'll probably hear me panting into the microphone. It's a lot harder than it looks. I have a ton of respect for those Peloton and all those other apps and the teachers that do that, because I'll tell you one thing, it's really not as easy as I thought it was when I started doing this. Okay, so the next one we're going to do is open up the hip into extension. A lot of people sit all day, right? They sit in this flex position. I'm not one of the type of people that say sitting is the new smoking, but I do believe that if you do something all day, you should at least try and train out of it. So, half kneeling stance, one knee up, one knee back. A lot of you probably know this stretch. Here's the cue. I don't want you to just push the knee forward. What happens there is you typically arch the back and you won't get as much of a true hip stretch. So what you're going to do is imagine you belt buckle, you're going to turn it up to the sky, and now squeeze that back glute as hard as you can. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. That should intensify that stretch. You're going to hold for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and back off. Now, here's what we're going to do, make it a little bit tougher. Squeeze, tilt, squeeze, lean forward. You should feel that stretch now. Now we're just going to lift up. Again, no arching. Tilt, now we're up. You can get a little lean forward. That should intensify that stretch. Like I had said, you want to load these muscle groups as well, not just hang into passive stretching here. So squeezing that glute will help lock that motion, that free range of motion that you're creating. Hopefully lock it into place a little bit better, help your body access it long down the road, not just for like 20 minutes after you're done stretching. Good, let's switch it up. We're just feeling the range of motion here. We're going to come back to it in a second. Good, squeeze, squeeze, tilt. Awesome, okay. Arms up this time. Squeeze, tilt, raise up, back off. Squeeze, tilt, raise up, and back off. Good, switch to the other side. 3 aggressive 3-second squeezes, meaning you're really trying to squeeze that glute as hard as you can. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Up, back off. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Up, back off. One more time, and good. Switch to that opposite side, last time through. Nice. This is another area for me, my hip extension is lacking. I don't know if it's simply just the way I'm built, or if I did something as a kid all the time that I tended to develop a very arched back, not a ton of hip extension. Whatever it might be, just something I have to spend time on now. And I notice I feel a lot better, both overall and my, my low back tweakiness sort of goes away. Okay, next one. What I'm gonna have you do, on your butt, 90-90 position, okay? This means that front leg, 90-degree angle, back leg, 90-degree angle. If you need the help, I want you to lean back. You can use your hands as help right now. We are going to experiment in this position. First of all, if this position is just really tough for you, hang out here, breathe. That's going to be your mobility. Then you'll switch sides, do it again. If this is feeling good for you, here's what you're going to do. That front foot, you're going to dig that knee into the ground. You're going to drive this back leg, back knee off the ground. My feet should be anchor points. You can imagine they're screwed into the floor. So here, we can just hang out here for a little bit, raise that back knee, try not to turn your body. Notice, my chest is facing this way, I'm just moving that back hip. This is external rotation. Awesome, so from here, just did about 12 of those. I'm gonna switch over, lift my knee as far as I can, and I start to switch. My kneecaps stay as far apart from each other as they can, and now I'm in the opposite position, and I'm going into external rotation on that right leg. I'm going to go 12 here. Some of you may start to feel a cramping sensation with this. Simply that, I like to call it a hard wire between your brain and your muscles. You're probably doing something your brain's not used to. Think of it as a short wire. Like it's short wires and your muscle starts freaking out, you'll get a cramp. This is different than a muscle cramp that you might have gotten when you were on the field, for instance, or doing a lot of activity. A little bit different. This is something you actually want to try and fight through. If you can't, and it's just too unbearable, trust me, I've been there, shake it out, try and alter your position a little. So now we're going to do 8 switches. Full switch like we just did. Awesome. Over the other side. Left hip. Lots of clicks and pops again, but trust me, you will feel all the better for this, both in the short and long term. Good, I got 2 more. Remember, kneecaps as far apart from each other as you can. My feet anchor to the ground. Awesome. The last one we've got, deep squat rockers, okay? So, what I want you to try and do, sit into a full squat with your feet flat. I know that's hard for some people. What you can do then, grab a wall, grab a chair, grab a TRX if you have access to a gym, hold out in front of you. That's going to stop you from basically falling back, like a lot of you probably want to do right now. So if you can sit into that deep squat, you're going to rock back and forth onto your toe in circles. You can even put your hands on the ground a little bit. We're just going to do this for 20 more seconds. There's actually a coach here, Coach Stephen Porti. He did 10 minutes a day back when quarantine first started for COVID. I tried it for about 2 days, and it's not for the faint of heart. Let me tell you that right now. So just sit down. Remember, grab something in front of you. If you don't have this range of motion, no problem. You can try to get here at some point. You can even just come down to where you want to be and just move through different ranges of motion, moving those hips side to side. Let's go for another 3, 2, 1. And all right, folks, that's going to do it. So that's the hip section. Hope you guys found something useful. Again, as always, feel free to reach out. You'll get tired of me saying that, but I do mean it. And I'll see you on the next video.